Hi, Lexie. I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. Such a pleasure to speak to you today. Thanks a lot for taking the time.
Yeah, of course.
Maybe you can just begin with a brief intro to this incredible new show, Charge Around the World. What can people expect when they tune in?
This is very exciting for me to announce that we are finally releasing my upcoming documentary, Charge Around the Globe, which is coming out on Amazon Prime in the UK on November 18th. This story is something that I've spent the past 2 years working on. It was inspired originally by a woman named Aloha Wanderwell, who in 1922 became the first person to drive a vehicle around the world. And she's such an unknown explorer for how prolific her adventures were. It was really exciting to have the opportunity to actually try to relive what she experienced 100 years ago, but this time in an electric vehicle. So my goal was to set a new world record for the first global circumnavigation in an EV. And that journey carried me across 6 continents over the course of 200 days and clocking up over 30,000 kilometers.
I mean, also, it's obviously come off the back of you going completely viral on your original record setting. Visiting all 196 countries before you were 21. So I guess maybe just taking us back a little bit, how did that all come about? Do you already have that set up in your mind? Was that something that almost happened quite incidentally? And what did you learn from that experience?
It was a mixture of both my own personal travels turning into this crazy idea to break a world record. I started traveling when I was really young with my family. My mom has her own travel agency that she started when she was 19. And so growing up, I was lucky enough to be able to travel with my family from time to time and really got the travel bug. I graduated from high school early to work full time. And while I was going to college, I was saving up and eventually started my first backpacking trip. And only 2 months into that backpacking trip, I came up with this idea to travel to every country in the world. I didn't even know how many countries there were or if other people had done this before. And after looking into it, I discovered this world record and I knew I would regret it for the rest of my life if I didn't try to break it.
How different is this project, I guess, from that first initial record that you broke? I mean, I guess doing it in an electric vehicle, that's a whole other set of challenges. But you've also got behind you that traveling experiences. You're used to kind of being in new environments, being in different cultures, maybe being able to cope with any sort of hurdles that come your way. So I guess there's new challenges, but you've also got some experience under your belt.
This new world record attempt was totally different than my previous experience. There were some things that were easier, some things that were harder. I had a lot of support on this journey, so the team really helped make it happen, having a team around me in comparison to it really just being me the first time around. But also, I had actually never even driven an electric car before starting this trip. So there was quite a learning curve there. And the reality of traveling overland for such an extended period of time in so many different countries. Driving in India, for example, was the most hectic experience ever, and I feel like I still hear the honking when I'm trying to sleep at night. But there were a lot of different highs and lows over the course of this journey that I'm really excited to share with the world.
And I guess maybe it's a stupid question, but even sort of being in front of the camera all that time. I mean, I know we're all sort of more and more used to sort of being in a bit of a goldfish bowl, with social media, but this is kind of like on another level. Was that something that just immediately you got very used to? Were there moments where you thought, oh, well, actually, can we shut that off? How do you sort of cope with the intensity of that?
That's a great question, actually. And not many people think about it from that perspective, but I got used to capturing my life from my own perspective, but it was totally different traveling with a documentary film crew. And yeah, whether or not you feel like you're having a good hair day or a bad hair day, or if you're in the mood to explain everything to camera, and all of that was definitely very challenging. It's really easy to turn on the camera and capture things when it's beautiful and it's going well, but it's so hard to turn on the camera and document things when things are not going well, when you're sick, when you're exhausted, when you're frustrated. And being able to like push myself to be able to share that part of the journey as well was, in retrospect, like the most important part.
And I guess that's something we also have to deal with, don't we, with social media? And perhaps there should be more of that, where, you know, maybe when it's in your own control, there is that tendency to only show the sort of the glossy, beautiful, great moments, when of course there are so many elements of travel which are boring and they go wrong, and you're feeling quite grumpy. So it's kind of getting the full picture, which is actually probably really refreshing for audiences.
Exactly. And I think that that's so important, not only in like the documentary film world, but also on social media in general. There's so much, especially in the travel space, that makes everything look so perfect all the time, and such a curated highlight reel. And of course, I share my highlights as well, but I do try to also share the perspective that you don't see as much. Like I've gotten so sick. I've gotten hurt. I've gotten lonely. I've, gotten stranded and stuck. And I've had such a variety of experience. It almost feels like for every amazing experience you have an equal and opposite negative potential experience that it's all a balance. And I think it's important for people to know that.
And I guess there's so many different angles you can look at this documentary on. I mean, one of them very much is the fact that you're following in the footsteps of Aloha, who did that journey 100 years ago. And, you're speaking to, other female drivers. You're also sort of putting a spotlight on the concept of being a solo female traveler. So is that something that was quite important to you, showing both kind of how we do have the freedom to do these things nowadays, but maybe there are sometimes those blockers, whether it's about, feeling unsafe or people underestimating you. So it's something that was like an important element of the project for you.
That's definitely a really important element of everything that I do. On this particular drive around the world, I wasn't alone, but I have traveled to 50 or 60 countries solo at this point. And I do think that it is something both men and women should experience at some point in their life, because when you're traveling by yourself, you have to grow so much more self-confidence in your ability to navigate complicated situations in places that you've never been before, and push yourself to have conversations with people that you might have not otherwise had. And I think that there's no better catalyst for personal growth than solo travel. And I especially try to use my platform as much as I can to be an example for especially young women who might be a bit nervous or scared to do something like that for themselves alone. And I also try to back that up with tips and advice for female travelers, especially, of how to avoid getting into uncomfortable situations. I think that harassment is something that's unavoidable literally no matter where you live in the entire world. It's something that all women experience in their life, and there is that shouldn't hold you back from having any experiences, in my opinion. And there are things that you can do to try to avoid getting yourself in uncomfortable situations. For me, I call them like my golden rules of solo travel. One, for example, is I typically wrap up my day after the sunset. I don't wander around by myself at night, and I also don't get intoxicated. And I found that avoiding alcohol and avoiding being out at night has really helped me avoid a lot of uncomfortable situations.
And I guess the other lens that you can look at this through is sustainability. The fact that you're going, around the globe with the electric vehicle. And I guess it is a big topic in today's world of how can we travel in a sustainable way? Because it's, unavoidable to not take any transport usually, but, which is the best way to do it? And I guess this is offering up one kind of solution, which is to use an electric vehicle. So is that something that's also also a really interesting topic, and particularly in today's world?
For me, when I was deciding to go on this trip, I had a lot of similar questions and perspectives to that a lot of people have when it comes to EVs, which is the idea that, potentially the infrastructure isn't there yet. It's not a reliable alternative. And also what happens when you run out of chargers. So I had a lot of those questions as well. And for me, one of the main goals was to almost investigate on the ground and get like a global snapshot of what's going on with these EVs. It's something we've seen massively turn like very popular over the past few years, and getting to know what different countries are doing with this tech and the infrastructure that they're developing, and where is the infrastructure good, like in Europe and in the US, where is it obviously non-existent in countries like Zimbabwe. And I really wanted to document at this point in time, because I do think that it is a really like historically significant point in time for the evolution of EVs. And I wanted to help document what it is right now in an adventurous way.
And going along the journey, I mean, I haven't had a chance to watch the whole thing yet, but what were some of the highlights for you, and what were some of the most challenging moments? Was there anything that was very funny that went wrong?
Oh, well, a lot of highs, a lot of lows. You'll have to watch the whole doc to see all of it. But for me, the highlight was definitely all of these incredible people that I was able to meet along the way. I met everyone from a all-female anti-poaching unit in South Africa to the first Muslim MMA fighter in Malaysia. So for me, travel is always all about the people, and it was really meeting them and hearing their stories and going on adventures with them. That was my favorite part of the trip. And there's inevitably a lot of lows, even just plainly spending so much time in a car. You don't realize how, like, I unexpectedly found so much more of an appreciation for like truck drivers, for taxi drivers, the people that are driving every day for their, whole careers deserve so much respect, because it's actually really not easy. Your body has a really hard time sitting for that long, and having to kind of just that one aspect alone of how do you kind of reverse the effects of driving for so long. When I got home, I actually haven't shared this with anyone else. It's kind of funny. I was trying to get back into working out, and I couldn't do squats correctly because the mobility on the ankle that I had been using for the gas pedal versus the other ankle was an 1.5 inch difference. Like, it really takes a toll on your body so much.
Ultimately, what do you hope people take away from watching it? And I guess, there's just going on this adventure with you and sharing that with you. Like we said about, women perhaps being inspired to travel, whether that's by themselves or with other people, but also for people to think about ways of traveling in a sustainable way, and that not to be held back necessarily by not wanting to have an impact or have a footprint on the planet, but also to be able to discover new cultures, which obviously can give us greater perspectives on our own lives.
I think you just put so much of it very well. And I think the only thing I could add is I really hope that through these documentary series, these episodes, that you can really see that it's so possible to accomplish anything that you set your mind to.
Do you already know what's going to be next for you? Have you got another record that you want to set, or?
Well, for now, I think I'm gonna really just appreciate the fact that this documentary took so much heart and soul and literal blood, sweat, and tears to create. So I'm really focused on just getting that out into the world. And if you want to see what's going to potentially happen next, you can always see on the social channels for Lexie Limitless.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that with me. Huge congratulations on the show, and can't wait to see what you do next as well.
I appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Bye. Bye.